Hello, everybody. Hi, and welcome. So nice to have you on this cool, frosty evening. So great. I'm Judy Maddox. I'm chair of our Western North Carolina Sierra Club, and we are very grateful that you are here. And as you know, tonight's program is on diversity, and we have the king of diversity right here, Mr. Will Harland, that we'll talk about more. But first, I want to push this button, and it's not pushing. So, all right, Miss Johnnicky, I think my buttons aren't being pushed, and I need to push some buttons here.
It did. Of course it did. There we go.
So it'll push now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as you can see, Miss Johnnicky is my rescuer, and yes. So this is a perfect segue. We are partners with Ollie, where you are, and I'm sure many of you, raise your hand if you do Ollie programs. Yes, yes, so a bunch of you. And that is lifelong learning, and what they are offering are programs that cover everything, and they're about to start on Monday, so, and you can still sign up if you're interested. But they have been here for years and will continue for years. So if you are interested, but they have partnered with us. So they are providing us a rescuer, Miss Button Pusher, and they are providing us this wonderful location and this wonderful tech. So we're very grateful. Okay, so we are part of Sierra Club. Sierra Club has 3 different layers for you to know. There is national, and if you join national, which I would encourage, you will get this beautiful magazine once a month. It will tell you travels all over the international arena. It will tell you all kinds of interesting articles. The second is our state chapter. You will get an email once a month called Footnotes online. And just to kind of give you a heads up, the people over in the east part of this huge, beautiful state, they're working on wood pellets. I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but England in its wisdom are thinking that our southeast forests are renewable energy, and they can come over and cut them down and chop them up into wood pellets and burn them for renewable energy. Wrong. And so we're trying our darndest to fight that, and we're trying to get the governor to fight that. But we had some success. Eviva, who was buying up private land and cutting down forest, is now going bankrupt. So yes. And the third, I think you know, it's us. It's Western North Carolina, and we've got lots of projects going, and I'm going to introduce you to a few of them right now. But first, we want to do a land acknowledgement. We want to offer our respect to the Cherokee, who have protected this land for generations and generations, and we owe them a great debt of gratitude. So our programs, ever since COVID, now we've started back, I think about maybe 6 months. We are both in person, as you can see, you wonderful people are in person, but we're also online. And this little computer right here has about as many people online as you guys are warming a chair. So every first Wednesday at 7 o'clock, same time, same place, right here. But to let you also know, we have a 5 o'clock leaders meeting. If you are interested, you can let me know. We kind of do a think tank where we talk about what programs do we want to do, what action alerts do we want to go for. Like we tried very hard to ban single-use plastics, and you probably know the outcome. The wonderful North Carolina state legislator wrote a law saying nobody could ban single-use plastics. So we're regrouping and trying to figure out what to do, because these plastic bags are killing us in the river and everywhere. So there is an online link, and if you haven't already done it, go to our website, WNC Sierra Club, put your name on the email, and you'll get an email every other Saturday telling you what we're doing, what we need your help on, what the next programs are. And this is the next program, guys, the primary election. Do you know this? It's going to be February 15th. Do you know it's like 1 month from now? Do you believe that? I mean, this is election season. And we have a beautiful political committee. They're going to interview candidates all the way up and down the ballot from governor and attorney general, all the way down to soil and water commissioner who's local in Nashville City and Buncombe County. And when people walk up to vote, we have people for 250 shifts. And hopefully I'm looking at some of you guys right now who are going to walk up and say, hi, would you like the endorsement of Sierra Club, who have interviewed all these people and looked at their records, and this is our recommendation. So a lot of people only vote for governor at the very top. But if they don't vote down line, then bam, I mean, what do we get locally? I mean, we don't have any control over who's doing what. So it's very important that everybody vote every race all the way. So if you look at this, it's February 15th to March 5th. It's 3 weeks. We're going to do only the weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and there's only one Sunday. We're only going to do 6 early voting sites. They're the libraries. They're South, West, East, Inca, Black Mountain, Weaverville, and the shifts are 3 hours. So there's a paper out on the front desk, but you can also catch me. But we would love to have you agree to do a 3-hour shift or more. And we'll get you materials, and all you do are handing them out. But if you know other people, we would love to have you help us recruit. Okay, so amazingly, we're going to have 2 hikes this month. I mean, we've been having 1 hike, and we're great. I do want to point out next Tuesday's hike is looking to be rained out. Evidently, there's 2 solid days of rain. So you can contact Bill Snow. It's on our WNC-sierraclub.org. And if you contact him, he's looking to bump it over 1 week. So contact him and he'll be in touch. The January 23rd, we're hoping, is a go, and Moore's Cove Falls with leader Ed Maggot. And again, you have to go on our website and contact these folks as to where to meet, what to do. And really good news. Do you know the Biden administration just proposed like 2 weeks ago to ban logging in old growth? It's like, yes, yes, yes. However, it's a proposal and it has to work its way, and it's shooting for 2025. But you know, our Nantahala Pisgah is very, very much involved, and they're looking to make this ban for every single national forest. But for us versus the West, which has real clear old growth, we frequently don't have a whole lot of real clear old growth. We have what's called mature forests. And so we're doing this dance with the U.S. Forest Service of what is mature and what they can kind of cut down and not cut down to try to have new growth or to protect songbirds or whatever they're trying to do. So that's an ongoing, continued situation. We have a kids adventure club. It's going to start back up in the spring and the fall, in summer. And if you're interested, we have a couple of different programs with inner city kids, and we take them out to pet snakes. So if you guys have this secret desire to pet snakes, come sign up with us. We'd love it. Community happenings, the Botanical Garden is now doing a series of 12 monthly classes. You will become a certified pollinator advocate. And as you know, the bees will love you, our pollinators will love you, and you might very well consider taking them up on this. So our next program, 1 month from today, February 7th, is on recycling. And you may feel like, hey, I've been recycling for years. But you know what? Our recycling bins get contaminated. It's called wishful recycling. It's like, oh, I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to put it in the bin. Well, guess what? That whole bin may get trash because it's contaminated. So we have a new owner of Kirby. And guess what? Kirby has to, it's not for profit, it's for profit. So they have to make money. And he's going to tell you all about where they have markets, what you can recycle, what you cannot recycle. So please join us and ask your friends to join. And now what you have come to join is wonderful Will Harland. I've known him for years and years and years. He's a fun guy and he's got a great family and 2 kids. One of them named River, and what's the name of the other?
And
Oh, Huck Finn. Okay, so he's wonderful. And he's going to tell you with all of these slides what they're working on. And he is the Southeast Administrator for the Center for Biodiversity. So here we go, Mr. Will, and help me. Do hold your questions till the end, and please put your questions in the chat if you are on. Okay, so Janaki, you may need to be a button chair. Yay.
well, thank you, Judy and Ken. It's an honor to be speaking with you all. And Sierra Club was the very first environmental organization I joined back in college. It's my roots. And Ken and Judy are exceptional, extraordinary leaders of the local chapter. So we're really lucky to have them doing all the work that they do for us. And they've been incredible mentors to me. I'm actually gonna, still working. Let's see if this one's working a little better. So congratulations to all of you, because you live in a global biodiversity hotspot. Not just a local or a regional or even a national, but a global hotspot of biodiversity. There are a lot of great reasons to live in Asheville in Western North Carolina. We talk about Beer City and Bike City and all of the great things here, but biodiversity often gets overlooked. And yet here we are living in a virtual temperate rainforest. This is America's Amazon that we live in. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the spectacular species that live right in our backyard, and hopefully inspire you to help protect them even more. We'll start with this amazing creature, and I'm going to do a quick trivia here. See what y'all know. And these are difficult, so I don't expect anyone to get these, but I know we've got some really sharp folks in the Sierra Club, so we just might get a few. But let's start with this. Does anyone know what species this is, or even what group of animals this might be? They're mussels. You got it. Yes. Freshwater mussels, the most endangered taxa in the country and on the continent. Mussels, 70% of them are threatened with extinction. They're really struggling, mainly because of dams. They suffer because of dams, and we'll talk about that in a second. Anyone know what specific mussel this might be? This is the Appalachian elk toe mussel, a federally listed species that occurs right here in the French Broad River. And it has been slowly moving upstream closer to Asheville as water quality has improved. So it's a really encouraging sign to see this endangered mussel slowly creeping upriver and as the water quality improves. Mussels are one of the most amazing creatures that no one knows about. So here is a different mussel. This is not an endangered mussel yet. This is the wavy rayed lamp mussel, but it does something extraordinary that a lot of mussels do. How does a mussel, which is essentially immobile, it attaches itself to rock for most of its life, how does it get upriver or downriver? How does it travel through streams? Any guesses? Okay, so you probably know. Anyone else have any guesses how they do it? In a way, yes. What they do is even though they're blind, these mussels have no eyes, yet they create these lures to attract fish. And in this case, the wavy-rayed lamp mussel has created this. That's not a real minnow. That is a lure that the mussel has created out of its own flesh to attract a fish to come and clamp down on it. When the fish tries to bite that lure, it gets a mouthful of baby mussels. The mussel sprays the eggs into the gills and mouth of the fish, who swims away, swims upstream, and eventually the babies drop off and create new mussels up and down the river. It's a remarkable adaptation that these mussels have made to ensure their survival and spread their offspring. But mussels get often overlooked, and they used to blanket our riverbeds. They are the water filters of our rivers. And without them, our water quality has suffered. But if we could bring them back, we could save ourselves billions and trillions of dollars in water filtration, because they do it themselves. They filter and clean our rivers. How about this one? It is a green salamander, that's right. This is the hickory nut gorge green salamander, which only lives in the hickory nut gorge, in a river gorge just southeast of Asheville that is rapidly developing. It's essentially the Lake Lure area. So it is barely hanging on, and it is also recently petitioned for federal protections under the Endangered Species Act. Here's another salamander. This one is the yellow spotted woodland salamander. It only lives on shale and sandstone outcrops in Appalachia that are also targeted by mountaintop removal coal mining companies. So there are only 13 populations left of these in the world, and they're all in great danger. But this is the salamander capital of the world. You live in the place where more species of salamander exist than anywhere else on the planet. How about this bird? Yes, wow, really sharp audience. This is a coastal bird, flies all up and down the Atlantic coast, but we have them in North Carolina and South Carolina, and they make one of the longest migrations on Earth. They fly 19,000 miles round trip from the tip of South America all the way up to the Arctic each year. The red knot, like tie a knot with your shoestring, K-N-O-T. So these remarkable birds that make this incredible journey. They are the ultimate endurance athletes. I was a trail runner and ultra marathon runner for many years, and I thought I was pretty tough until I learned about birds like these that travel 19,000 miles every year. But to refuel, they depend on a species and its eggs, and they time their migration up to the Arctic each spring and summer to coincide with this mass spawning event of these creatures. Anyone know what these are? Yes, horseshoe crabs, under the full moon of May and June, come on shore by the tens of thousands, and used to be even by the millions, and bury their eggs in the beach. And then the red knots arrive and feast on those eggs. And that is how they make it all the way up to the Arctic. They depend on our Atlantic shore and the eggs deposited by these horseshoe crabs to make it up there. The ones, when these horseshoe crabs don't nest, the red knots don't make it. So it's another example of how all these species are interrelated, but a spectacular species that has helped save our lives, by the way. These horseshoe crabs have blue blood, which it's an ancient blood. This creature has been around for 450 million years, one of the most ancient creatures still with us. And so it has a very ancient immune system. It doesn't have an immune system like us. Its blood directly detects pathogens. So it can detect if a bacteria is invading it, and the blood attacks it directly. Well, pharmaceutical companies have discovered and used this blue blood to test vaccines and medical devices and pharmaceuticals to ensure that it's safe. So every vaccine, every injection, everything medically that's been done to you has been likely tested by horseshoe crab blue blood. Fortunately, there's now a synthetic alternative that works even better than horseshoe crab blood. They've essentially simulated the ingredients of the horseshoe crab blood, and there's now a synthetic, and that's a good thing because horseshoe crabs are in trouble. Their numbers have declined by 90% in the past 20 years. I used to see these all the time on our shores, and now I occasionally see one or two, and that's just anecdotally, but we've seen this all along the coast. So we're hoping that this synthetic alternative will help horseshoe crabs and by extension, red knots and all of the other shorebirds that depend on their eggs, help them to recover. Couple more species. Anyone know what this one is? Yes, wow, I haven't stumped you on a single one. This is the bog turtle. This is, if you look in the top left, this is North America's smallest turtle. And it is pretty damn cute. And that's one reason it is one of the most heavily poached turtles in the country. And as a result, its populations have crashed. But they depend on mountain bogs and wetlands, one of the most endangered ecosystems in the country. There just aren't a lot of them left, and a lot of the wetlands get drained for development or agriculture. So they're hanging on in the few remaining wetlands that remain in Southern Appalachia, but they're right here in the Western North Carolina area. And we're pretty lucky to still have them, and we're fighting to protect them. We've just petitioned to list these turtles as under the Endangered Species Act as well. Last one, this is a toughie. This is the candy darter. This is a small fish that lives in Appalachian streams. I wanted to point it out for a couple of reasons. One, it has been central to stopping, or at least slowing, several of the pipelines that have been proposed for Appalachia, because this fish lives in Appalachian streams. It's incredibly endangered. It needs clean water, and silted rivers that are affected by pipelines and development and logging tend to clog the streams that they depend on. But I also wanted to mention and just show you a photo of how extraordinary beautiful the fish of Western North Carolina and Southern Appalachia are. This isn't the only spectacular fish. There are dozens, there are hundreds of species of freshwater fish that put on this colorful plumage in the spring and summer when they're mating, and not plumage, but elaborate colors that attract their mates. And we've just recently started the Blue Ridge Snorkel Trail. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission just created a snorkel trail. I would encourage you to go get a cheap snorkel or just some goggles and stick your head in the water this spring or summer in a beautiful place like the South Toe River and see species like this just swimming right around you. There are an incredible number of beautiful species right in our creeks and rivers that we don't even notice. All right, so I'm going to quickly fly through some basics about biodiversity, and then I want to get to your questions about biodiversity and the threats to it and how we can help protect it, especially right here in Western North Carolina. I think most of you know what biodiversity is. It's essentially life on Earth, and there are genetic, species, and ecosystem measures of biodiversity, but it's essentially our hedge against global famine. It's our life support system, and these species are valuable for their own sake. They have intrinsic value. They're important for our health and our well-being. Obviously, they provide a lot of ecosystem services. They regulate carbon, they pollinate, they water purification like the mussels, and all of these are really important to quantify and measure. But and they also provide a lot of spiritual and cultural identity. I think one reason we fight for the environment and fight for old growth are to protect the species that live there. I think it's a really important part of who we are and why we do the things we do. And so monarch butterflies, we're going to talk about in a second, are one of the most endangered species, but something that we grew up with in our backyards and that now we're seeing decline at an alarming rate. But the biodiversity is both valuable for its own sake and also essential to our health. My wife is a doctor and she's worked with some physicians on some studies that show that patients who have windows in their hospital rooms recover remarkably quicker and better than those who don't. Just having that little access to nature makes a big difference. There's also been several studies with school children who have green spaces versus schools that don't have green spaces and how important that is for cognitive development. So it's essential to our health, but it's also essential to our economy. Now, some people say, well, what good is nature? What good is biodiversity? What does it do for us? Well, World Economic Forum estimates $44 trillion per year in ecosystem services. Just bats alone, eating insects, saves $50 billion a year in agricultural losses. Those mosquitoes and insects and potato beetles and pathogens that are invading agricultural crops, bats protect them, and bats are a really important species, especially here in Western North Carolina. So there are tangible, concrete economic reasons to protect biodiversity, but then there's also just the intrinsic, inherent value of biodiversity itself. So here are a couple of really important species right here in Southern Appalachia. We've talked about a few initially. This is the red wolf. Anyone know where the red wolf exists? At the Nature Center, that's right. There's a couple at the Nature Center. That's right. The only population of red wolves left in the wild is in eastern North Carolina in the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge, just 10 miles from the Outer Banks. That's it. And there's only 25 left in the wild. There were as many as 130 just a few years ago, and that population has plummeted. The primary causes are gunshot mortality, and vehicle strikes. So we're really trying to protect the American red wolf, which once ranged all across the Southeast from Texas to Virginia. So a really important carnivore species that has declined in the past century. We've got some amazing species, great and small, some plants. This is a center for botanical diversity, the Gray's lily, a Southern Appalachian endemic, and then running cedar, a more common plant. Incredible Luna moths and eastern box turtles, also a heavily poached species. We're losing our turtles at an alarming rate. We also have the Southeast is also one of the most important turtle hotspots in the world. We have more species of turtles in the Southeast than anywhere else on the planet. But unfortunately, they're being poached. Water quality, a lot of threats to turtles are causing them to decline as well. Tiny species are small things rule the world. We tend to focus on the charismatic megafauna, the red wolves and the grizzly bears, but it's the little things that protect us and drive nature. Even like giant sequoias like this tree shown here, there are ecosystems within ecosystems. Within the branches of that sequoia, our whole soil accumulates in the branches of those trees, and plants grow in those crotches of those branches, and salamanders live in those micro habitats. There's the wandering salamander, a skydiving salamander that leaps from branch to branch of the sequoias and never hits the ground. One more quick trivia question for you. What is the largest organism on Earth? Yes, this grove of aspen, they think, is perhaps the largest organism, and it's actually a collection of it's 70,000 trees, but they all are connected by a single root system. So essentially are a single root source. Yes. The one on the left, the aspen grove, that is in, I believe, Wyoming. It's in the Northern Rockies. And that is what we think is the largest colony of aspen and the largest single living organism on the planet. But there are other candidates. Some say ant colonies. Are they individual ants? Are they one giant superorganism? They all seem to be working kind of collectively to propagate their colony. E.O. Wilson, you know, studied ants, and he made a really strong argument near the end of his life that nature and evolution isn't just about competition. That's what we hear, survival of the fittest. That's what we're taught. But an equally important part of evolution is cooperation. And it makes sense if you think about it. Think about how we live. We depend on family and community, and that's true across the animal kingdom, that cooperation is just as important as an evolutionary force as competition. So lots of different kinds of species on Earth. J.B.S. Haldane famously said that that God had an inordinate fondness for beetles. 1 in 4 species on Earth are beetles. So there's a lot of small things, and those small things are. I'm going to skip ahead for a second. Here's some of the biodiversity hotspots. You can see the Southern Appalachians and the Southeast are some of the most important in the country and in the world. And let me just skip us. We talked about the tree canopy and some of the species here in Southern Appalachia, but diversity is also within us. It's above us in the trees, it's below us in the soil, but it's also right within us, in our guts. As you may have heard, there are more cells in your body that belong to other organisms than belong to you. The human body is made up of more bacteria and viruses and fungi and protozoa and other creatures than your own human cells. So we depend on these organisms. There are sometimes outside invaders that make us sick, but most of the cells in your body are protecting you, are in your gut. They're helping you digest. They're protecting you. They're serving all of these human services, your human ecosystem, from your lungs to your skin to your stomach. They're there and they're helping you function. So again, we are a cooperative ecosystem ourselves. And as I said, small things run the world. We often overlook them, but they are what's driving biodiversity. They're what's supporting it. Things we can't see. Most of the endangered species are small. We've talked about some of the big carnivores, but also some of the mussels and the minnows in our streams. And I love this photo on the far right, because that shows you just in 24 hours what mussels in an aquarium can do. Can you imagine what they could do for our rivers and streams, what they used to look like? Thomas Jefferson described crossing the Ohio River and never touching his feet on the bottom of the river, that you could essentially walk across on mussel beds. That's what used to exist in our rivers. And if those were restored, how much money we would save, how much healthier our drinking water would be if we just simply let mussels do their thing. Monarchs are another important species that, like the red knot, make these incredible migration journeys. They are these delicate butterflies that seem to barely have any weight, and yet they travel thousands of miles from Mexico back to the United States. Another remarkable migration, but we're losing them at an alarming rate, primarily due to pesticide use. So here's what their journeys look like, and we think that's by protecting monarchs, we're also protecting all of our health, protecting our food, protecting our schools, protecting all of us from overuse of pesticides. All right, I want to make sure we have plenty of questions, plenty of time for questions at the end. So I'm going to run through. You know a lot about the charismatic megafauna, the big animals that are really important. Just want to point out why whales matter, for example. It's not just because they're cool and majestic, but they play a really important role in ecosystems. As you know, we lost a lot of our whales due to whaling around the turn of the century, but that had cascades of consequences, because we also hunted seals, and so orcas started feeding on something else. They started feeding on sea otters, which eat sea urchins, and without sea urchins, without the otters, we had more sea urchins, which were eating the kelp forest. So we lost kelp forests almost completely when we lost a lot of whales. So cascading effects. You can see what's left of a kelp forest in the Pacific as sea urchins have spread across what was once a vibrant kelp forest. Same with Yellowstone. You've probably heard this iconic story now of how restoring wolves to Yellowstone had cascading effects across the ecosystem that literally changed the course of rivers. When the Yellowstone wolves came back, the ungulates, the moose and the deer couldn't graze and browse as easily, so they weren't grazing down all of the trees next to rivers. So suddenly there were trees growing in riparian areas, and that strengthened the banks and the root systems, which enabled the streams to meander more. And so all these, and then the birds came back because there were trees along the rivers. So these cascading effects of restoring carnivores and restoring species to their ecosystems. Right here in the Southeast, we have some other keystone species like the pileated woodpecker and the red cockaded woodpecker. The red cockaded, really important for longleaf pine ecosystems. So talked about a lot of these already, large predators. What do we do? They're facing a lot of threats, and you probably know a lot of these threats already, but I'll just highlight the acronym that kind of encapsulates all of them. It used to be HIPPO, and then climate change came along, so we had to add a C, so it's CHIPPO. But climate change, habitat loss, invasive species, pollution, poaching, and overconsumption. And you know some of this stuff, but 1 million species are estimated to be threatened with extinction. We are in the midst of an extinction crisis. Some say this is the sixth mass extinction. There have been 5 previous mass extinctions, but we are part of the 6th extinction crisis. An estimated 10 million species on Earth, 1 million are threatened with extinction. What's also heartbreaking is that even common species are declining. Almost 70% of vertebrate animals have declined by 70% since 1970. That's an amazing statistic. 70% of animal populations have declined in the past 50, 60 years. And that's across all taxa. So it's heartbreaking to think about what we're losing, both common and rare. But we're seeing it especially in endemic and rare species. And another startling statistic that really hurts my heart is that 96% of the vertebrate biomass on Earth are humans and our livestock. So that leaves 4% for everything else, for the whales, the giraffes, the penguins, the birds. That's the 4% that's left. So here in the United States, we've already lost about 600 species. 1/3 of our species here in the United States are threatened with extinction. And the solutions are intertwined. We're in the midst of a climate crisis and an extinction crisis. And fortunately, the solutions to both overlap. Those Venn diagrams overlap very well. And solving them both will require those same solutions, especially nature-based solutions. Protecting carbon-rich ecosystems helps protect the climate and the species that depend on those forests, which is why the mature and old growth forest efforts and the old growth amendment that Judy mentioned earlier is so important. Those old growth forests are a nature-based solution that protects, that stores carbon and protects northern long-eared bats and Carolina flying squirrels and the species that are utterly dependent on the old growth of our Southern Appalachians. And it's all intertwined within communities too. It's going to take all of us. 80% of the biodiversity on Earth today is on lands owned or governed by indigenous people. So they've done a really good job of protecting it, and we need their help in ensuring that their lands are protected, and we need to make sure that we're working cooperatively with indigenous people as we advance these climate and carbon solutions and species solutions. We've lost so much already, we don't know sometimes what we've lost. I think about this every hike. I'm in the woods. I don't know what a chestnut forest looked like, but 1 in 4 trees in Southern Appalachia used to be chestnuts. What was that like to be under these towering groves of chestnuts? How many animals did those support? Those chestnuts raining down and feeding the bears and the other critters that once inhabited the forest. So oftentimes we don't even know what we're missing. We're in the midst of some extinction of some other iconic tree species right now. We're losing the hemlocks. They're essentially gone. They're on life support. We're injecting them with pesticides to keep them alive, to try to give them a fighting chance. But most of the hemlocks in the wild are dead or dying. And the same thing is happening with ash trees. The emerald ash borer, an invasive species, is wiping out our ash trees. And then bats, which get such a bad rap, are one of my favorite creatures and are so important to our forests here in Western North Carolina. They're suffering from white nose syndrome, another invasive species, a fungus that is essentially wiping out all of especially the cave-dwelling bats, the ones that hibernate in caves in the winter, are just getting decimated. But these are really important species for pollination, for insect control. People get scared around bats because they hear about rabies. Less than 1% of bats have rabies, but all bats eat mosquitoes, or all bats here in Western North Carolina eat mosquitoes and insects that can transmit diseases. So having bats is much more important than losing bats. And they're really important in our Pisgah-Nantahala National Forest. We have several species of bats that are especially important. Karin? That's right. For folks online, what Karin just said is that old growth forests are especially important for bats because those older trees with the thicker bark, they can nest and forage in the bark of the trees themselves much better in old growth forest. And so that's another reason why this new forest plan amendment that has been announced nationally is so vital in protecting old growth forests here in Southern Appalachia and across the country. So invasive animals, they're everywhere and they're often our companions, unfortunately. But that's not the only threat. As you saw, Chippo, it's not just invasive species or habitat loss, but it's also our consumption patterns, our food choices, Amazon forests being wiped out. But we live right here in America's Amazon, and our forests are being wiped out. And Judy alluded to this in her opening remarks. The Southeast is being harvested. The forests of the Southeast are being harvested at rates faster than the Amazon. But they're being sent overseas to Europe for chip mills, for biomass, for wood pellets, because Europe considers them a renewable resource, but they're cutting down our forests to fuel their quote unquote renewable energy source. So our forests are being decimated here in the Southeast. And we need to make sure we're fighting for them while we also fight for the Amazon forest as well. And as you know, a lot of those forests are being converted to cattle and agriculture. You've seen these kinds of statistics, are exploitation of fish and commodities. So the solutions, 30 by 30 is an ambitious and exciting goal. 50 by 50 is a moonshot that we can all strive for. We only have 12% of lands protected, but if we strengthen the existing protections for Forest Service lands, for example, we could do much better and protect our public lands more strongly. But there's a lot of solutions that we can do. I think we have to get there through legislation, through grassroots advocacy. There's several existing and moving legislation pieces right now that would be really important in taking big steps to protecting wildlife. I think the Recovering American America's Wildlife Act has the best chance of passing right now. It nearly passed last year and would provide some essential funding to states and tribes and territories to do the on-the-ground conservation work that's urgently needed. But there are several other bills that could move things forward. And we also need to protect and strengthen the Endangered Species Act itself. It is constantly under assault, now more than ever, with legislative riders that essentially try to undo parts or all of the Endangered Species Act. And so we are constantly playing defense while also trying to strengthen and play a little offense. And then one last concept I'll leave you with, maybe we need rights of nature. Maybe we need to bestow rivers with the same rights that other things have, like corporations, for example. If corporations have personhood, why shouldn't a river? At least could it have legal standing so that perhaps we could give them a fighting chance in our courts and our legal and legislative systems. So there are some efforts already underway right now at the local level. In, of all places, Florida, the Wakiva River was proposed to have rights in a local ordinance. It was subsequently struck down, but Orange County passed an ordinance to give the Wakiva River rights. The same thing happened in Toledo, Ohio. They gave Lake Erie a Bill of Rights. It happened in Pennsylvania to try to stop fracking. Some local townships, essentially counties, passed laws and ordinances to give rights to rivers. Many of those have been stopped or halted by legislators, but it's a promising step. And these are not in tree-hugging hippie areas. This is Toledo, Ohio, and Orange County, Florida, and rural Pennsylvania that are fighting for rights of nature. And globally, it's happening in Ecuador and Bolivia and New Zealand, where whole countries are adopting rights of nature in their national constitutions. Maybe the United States can get there someday. Maybe we can start taking steps right now to give nature, to give rivers, to give species and ecosystems especially some kind of legal standing so that they have a fighting chance. It takes all of us with our choices and our voices to stand up and protect species. Extinction is a political choice. I think the question I want to leave you with is, do we really care about any other species other than our own? How we answer that question will decide the fate of millions of species, millions of relatives that we share the planet with. And I hope we can work together to protect as many of those species as possible. So I'd love to answer any questions you have about any of this or anything related to this, anything about biodiversity or critters right here in Western North Carolina that you're curious about. I'm happy to help. We also have some brilliant scientists and experts in the room and online. So I'd love to hear any questions, and thank you for all your help.
We have two microphones, so just raise your hand. And Ken, I don't know if you want to start, but I'd love for you to go back to that that God loved beetles. I mean, I didn't get a chance to look at that pie chart.
About Haldane and his quote about beetles?
About just that pie chart, what is divided. You had it.
Sure. Yeah, so there's an extraordinary number of beetles. We actually don't even know how many species there are on Earth. We estimate around 10 million, but it could be as many as the estimates vary from 100 million to 8 million. 10 is probably the most commonly recognized number, but there we go. And these are just the described species. We've only described 1.2 of the roughly 8.7 million species. So we don't even know what's out there. We don't even know what we're losing. And so that's what's frightening. We need all hands on deck to survey what still remains. There's some exciting work done right in Great Smoky Mountains National Park to survey the species each year, and they discover new ones every year. So that kind of work is really important, just identifying what we have before we lose it. But you can see beetles have the largest slice of the pie, but plants are really important. Plants are the most listed species, most listed taxa under the Endangered Species Act. There are several hundred plants listed, and this is an epicenter of plant diversity. So we have some extraordinary plants right here in our backyard that need help. But you can see that we focus on the big species, the charismatic megafauna, but they make up only, 1%, less than 1%.
Sure. A couple of comments online. One is that isn't really overpopulation what's really driving much of this?
I think population is part of the problem, but equally, if perhaps more damaging, is overconsumption. So yes, our population has grown rapidly, and that has driven consumption rates even higher, but overconsumption, exploitation of resources, I think, is the even greater problem. Every year we overshoot our resources by April. If you're familiar with that statistic, where if we would just consume just the Earth's resources, how quickly would we use those up, and in a given year? And we use those up by April of each year. So we are over consuming the resources of our planet way too fast, and it's simply unsustainable. And I think that is the larger problem, is addressing those consumption rates, bringing the exploitation of species and the overexploitation of resources, especially in the developed world, to more sustainable rates. I think that is the more pressing concern.
I have a question.
Okay, and then I'll explain that. Yeah, where's that coming from? Sorry.
I have a question.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Man, I can't.
If
I
you have a
am
question, raise your hand.
I am
Somebody bring the
online.
mic.
Oh, okay,
Fine.
sorry.
I am
Looking around
online.
the room, sorry, we
Yeah,
couldn't
we were-
find you.
We're expecting if you please put it in the chat so we can read it.
Yeah, I put it, but I don't know if somebody's checking.
Okay, go ahead and ask your question.
Well, more than that question, I think I'm a health coach actually. My name is Shura Alvarado. I live in Connecticut and I live in North Carolina. And during the experience that I have, and I was discussing in one of the meetings that we have here in the city, because I think it's a lot that we can do, but because it's a lot of interest, it's a lot of people who has a business and produce different kind of products that are in the market. Can you imagine if we have a loss, which is a good idea, I think, have a loss, a lot of people who has a business who actually make money, and the state receive money from, because obviously when you produce a product, you have to pay fees in order to put in the market. Not only that, but pay taxes and stuff. So actually, in general, the country receive money out of these companies. And if we put a laws and stuff that you were talking about, which, like I say, I think it's a good idea. I think governments are not gonna be easy to support it because of that, because of money. It's money involved. There's a lot of money involved.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think my response would be that nature provides us with a lot of ecosystem services and a lot of money. And here in Western North Carolina, a lot of ecotourism and tourism and property value and intrinsic value. So I think there are ways we can create sustainable economies that don't wipe out whole species or ecosystems. I think we have to find ways to structure our economies to do that. So I don't think it's an either or. I think we can have robust, vibrant economies that don't overexploit the resources. And Western North Carolina, Asheville could be an example of that. We have the momentum and I think the will to do that. So I'm hopeful that we can keep our forests intact keep our species around, and show the world that you can have both a very strong economy and a lot of species.
Mm.
Another question online was, why are box turtles being poached? What are people doing with them?
They are selling them online or overseas. They're being transported to China and elsewhere. They're transported all over the globe, sadly, because they're easy to catch and easy to sell. They're for the pet trade. Some turtles purportedly have medicinal value. I'm not sure specifically about the eastern box turtle, but they're being sold for profit. They're free, they're out there, and they're easy to catch. So folks who want to make money, grab them up. So it's heartbreaking. Fortunately, there's some really groundbreaking work being done right here in Asheville to protect them. One of the best biologists in the country, JJ Apodaca, is based here in Asheville, and he just got a $100,000 award. It was featured in the Citizen Times earlier this week to help protect the poaching of eastern box turtles and other turtles using some really clever genetic techniques.
I'm curious about the water cleaning effects of mussels. Is it all practical, or has it been tried to reproduce them and reintroduce them to rivers?
Yes, they can be reintroduced. Not all species can, because they have a really complicated life cycle as we looked at initially. They depend on host fish. So you have to make sure you reintroduce them in streams that still have their host fish around, so that when they create those lures or spread their eggs, they need those other fish. But generally, yes, mussels can be reproduced. There's a great organization called Conservation Fisheries that is doing that work. They're based in Marion, and they reproduce mussels, captive, raise them, and then release them into the wild. So they're working with fisheries biologists right here in the state to propagate those mussels. So it can be done, and it's starting to be done right here in Western North Carolina.
On the mussel topic, is it like because of the dams and not having moving water and lower dissolved oxygen levels, organics and things like that, that's causing them to be like population shrinking?
That's exactly right. And even the fish can't often get above the dams. So that blocks their migration. And if they can't move any further upstream, they're essentially locked into what's left of the stream habitat. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the downstream effects of those dams is more siltation, less oxygen, fewer food sources, and so it just has more cascading effects for mussels. I think there are many dams that could be removed. There are a lot of non-functional dams that aren't being even used anymore for hydropower or any other purpose. They're just kind of legacy dams still in the rivers that could come out. There's an exciting dam removal project happening in Western North Carolina with the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians. They're removing the Gila Dam on the Oconaluftee River, which is going to restore miles of habitat for the Appalachian elk toe, that first species we saw, that mussel, that's in the Oconaluftee, and that's going to be able to move upstream. And equally important is a fish species, the sickle-fin red horse, that was a culturally important fish for the Cherokee, is now going to be able to move upstream. It's been blocked by the Gila Dam for decades. And now with the removal of this dam, hopefully both the sickle-fin red horse and the Appalachian elk toe, among other species, are going to be able to move further upstream into the Smokies.
There's a question online that said, is there a consultant or agency you would recommend to help with diversity on land for private landowners? I have 125 acres I would like to preserve and help diversify for wildlife.
That's wonderful. And there are several right here in Asheville. I think you just do a Google search and you'll find several. And we have some folks here in the audience that do that kind of work. So I'd highly recommend several of them. Karen Hyman is here. I know she's an environmental consultant that does incredible work. But I think you could find many others, but I highly recommend Karen. She's been a champion for old growth forests and species for decades here in Western North Carolina, and has been key to protecting the Nantahala-Pisgah National Forest and leading the work to create the Craggy National Scenic Area, which would be a really exciting the first ever national scenic area in North Carolina.
And the Appalachian Highlands Conservancy can help with the process of putting your land into conservancy.
Yeah, that's
And
a
how-
great point. Yeah, there are several Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy, Conserving Carolina, Mainspring. Depending on where you live, where your property is in Western North Carolina, there are different land trusts that can also help with that work.
Somebody online says Gila Environmental does that planning work.
Excellent.
Are you an advocate of converting grass lawns to wild lawns? And can you give us a
Absolutely.
rough estimate of what sort of impact that might have?
Yes, especially for monarchs and migrating species, I think, and just for your own sanity, I mowed lawns in high school, and I've wasted a lot of my life, pushing a lawnmower. And so for your health, for the health of the planet, I think if you can get away from lawns as much as possible, you'll find a lot more fun and cool things in a wild or rewilded backyard or front yard. And the monarchs, you think it's just a small patch, but monarchs don't distinguish between public and private land. They're flying from Mexico. They're hungry. If they see a patch of wildland and you happen to have some pollinating flowers that are growing there, so they will land there, and that could help fuel them and keep that species robust and healthy. So species like that depend on you to rewild your lawns.
Could you update about the Craggy National Forest or scenic?
Sure. So the Craggy National Scenic Area is a proposal to protect about 16,000 acres of the Pisgah National Forest just outside of Asheville. And it would become the first national scenic area in North Carolina. Virginia already has 3 national scenic areas. Georgia has one. North Carolina is way more beautiful than both of those states, and we deserve a national scenic area. And there's no place more beautiful and more fitting than Craggy. If you've been to Craggy Gardens, those views, that overlook, that essentially is the forest that we would be protecting. And there's a lot of old growth forest that would be protected in this national scenic area, a lot of trails, waterfalls, and a lot of species, including Carolina northern flying squirrel, the spruce fir moss spider, this tiny tarantula. We have tarantulas right here in Southern Appalachia, but they're really small and they won't hurt you.
I have a question about the concept of ecotourism and the built-in conundrum that exists in the proposition of ecotourism, or tourism for that matter. Tourism and any number of other things that are affiliated, like second home ownership, are all a part of our consumption patterns.
Yeah.
Ecotourism was even mentioned earlier in your talk as one of the values for, I don't know if that was on the Monarch slide, but it was mentioned as a value. And you were emphasizing that, of course, all of these actions of conservation need to be for the species itself and not, and they cannot be, well, I can understand the concept of local ecotourism to promote the awareness, but there is a great consumption expense to the model. So I wanted to ask you if there's any organization that you're aware of, including Sierra Club, or that has done a definitive sort of analysis of ecotourism and come up with policy statements about where it fits into the big picture.
You're absolutely right to raise the real costs that are often overlooked in so-called ecotourism or the abuse of that term, because you're right. Tourism still comes with a heavy carbon footprint and price tag. It's better than perhaps some of the alternatives, better than, clear cutting a forest for industrial agriculture or CAFOs, factory farms or other forms of more harmful, intensive uses of the land. But it does have a cost, no doubt about it. And we need to find ways to contain that, and this goes way beyond my area of expertise. I'm a scientist, but I share your concerns about overhyping the ecotourism part of it to the detriment of species and ecosystems. So is there a way, and I think that's something we wrestle with locally here, at city council meetings, how do we sustainably nurture our local economy and keep businesses healthy, but also protect the mountains and everything around us? Maybe that is more infill of development within Asheville, but that comes with NIMBYism and concerns about, in your backyard. So these are real struggles that don't have easy answers, but I would suggest that the more we can protect our public lands and wild spaces, that's the place to start. And make sure that those places, if we're talking 30 by 30, let's protect our national forests, all of our public lands, state, local, federal, and then from an economic standpoint, more we can do voluntarily with conservation easements to protect more of the landscape, and then perhaps concentrate our development on places that are already degraded and find some kind of balance there. But there's not an easy answer to your question, but I'm glad you raised it. And I think it's the one question we have to wrestle with on a daily basis in all of our communities.
Can I just add briefly to that? There's a number of situations in Africa where ecotourism has actually stopped the poaching or significantly reduced poaching. And also, because there's jobs coming with that, it has kept local farmers from killing elephants and some of the other animals, because there's now money to compensate them if they lose livestock or something like that. So there's certainly a number of situations where ecotourism is actually helping preserve some of the endangered animals, particularly in Africa, that I'm aware of.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Regarding urban biodiversity, do you think there are any good models in the U.S. of urban areas having ways to create connectivity for biodiversity in urban areas? It seems to be a real problem everywhere. We're
It is.
losing tree canopy, we're losing, a lot of areas are getting paved, increasing our problems with climate change, urban heat island effect, and so forth. We need some good models, it seems like, to deal with that. And I'm not sure there are any great models out there. There's great ideas, but are there good models?
Yeah, we work nationally. I'm with the Center for Biological Diversity. I'll mention California has some good things in the works, but actually we're not too far behind here in Western North Carolina in terms of connectivity, which I agree is essential. As our footprint grows, we have to create corridors and connectivity. One thing happening right here in Western North Carolina is the Safe Passages Project, where we're essentially creating overpasses and underpasses across Interstate 40 near Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I think that's a really good vision. We need more of those. We need that for Interstate 26 as well. And we need more than just one for Interstate 40 and Interstate 26. We need more focus on those wildlife overpasses and wildlife crossings. And that's not just for the wildlife, that's for us. There are a lot of people who are injured and even killed by wildlife crossing the road, causes billions in damages. So it's a safety issue for humans as well as for species. So I think that gives me hope that we're now investing with the Department of Transportation in North Carolina to create these wildlife crossings. And in other places like California, they've got many of these massive multi-million-dollar projects in the works. And I think the Inflation Reduction Act just devoted a significant chunk of change to more wildlife crossings and overpasses. But that's the kind of infrastructure we need to start building.
So two questions. One, explain 30 by 30. And second, you talked about overconsumption. What can we as individuals specifically do about our overconsumption?
Yeah, so real quick, 30 by 30, if you haven't heard about it, it's the bold vision put out by America the Beautiful about through the Biden administration to protect 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. We still have a ways to go. We've only protected about 12%, but we could easily get there if we fully protected our public lands. Many people think that national forests, for example, are protected lands, that they're just like national parks, but they're managed very differently. Parks are under the Department of the Interior. National forests are under the Department of Agriculture. And as a result, they have different goals. And so under the Department of Agriculture, they often treat trees just like crops, and they're often heavily harvested landscapes. But if we could more strongly protect our national forests, that could really help get us to that 30 by 30 goal. I think there are a lot of opportunities in our oceans and in our streams, our freshwater rivers right here in the Southeast that hold so much of our biodiversity. If we could have more buffers along streams, simple solutions like that, a 30 to 50 to 100-foot buffer along every river in the country would maybe be the best thing we could do to protect biodiversity and our drinking water and our health and get us to 30 by 30. What else could we do? Someone mentioned eat less meat. Keep extinction off your plate as much as possible. That would be one step you could do individually. There are a lot of little local things like have been mentioned tonight. Let your lawn grow wild or a part of it. Just experiment with it. Try it. You don't have to go full on vegetarian, but try one day without meat or a couple of days a week. Tiptoe into it and see if it works for you. But those little things, for me, I think what you do also sets an example for others and shows that you're trying and makes you an example to people that you may not even notice are observing you, your children, your friends. If you are taking concrete steps, even if they're small, they do make a difference, both in the larger equation, but also in the little inspiration that you provide to others through your example.
We want to thank Will. That was very inspirational and very beautiful. You want to do your last slide with your contact. He wants to answer any questions and be available, so this will be his contact if you want to reach out to him. I want to invite you back next month, February 7th, for recycling. And so that's one way that we can stop over consuming. We can get everything back into the flow. So 7 o'clock right here. Let me know if you're interested in our leaders meeting at 5. And please let me know if you're interested in helping with the election, handing out our Sierra Club endorsements for environmental candidates. You can talk to me right now, or there's a paper you can sign as you walk out. So thank you, everybody. Next month.